they'll say F you or, whatever. It's kind of like they want to sacrifice you.
Who gets back up 3 days later after he gets murdered in public?
Mel Gibson was once Hollywood royalty. With Mad Max, Lethal Weapon, and Braveheart, he was a star whose talent seemed untouchable. But behind the fame, cracks were forming a single night in 2006. A few heated words and years of private struggles began spilling into the public eye.
Why are the big realms of good and evil, and they exist. They're as real as we are.
Suddenly, the golden image of a celebrated actor started to crumble. Fans, studios, and the media watched as his personal demons collided with his career, and his outspoken nature put him at odds with Hollywood itself. Stay tuned as we unpack the story of how Mel Gibson's own confessions reshaped his life. The 2006 DIU arrest. In the early hours of July 28, 2006, Mel Gibson was pulled over by Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies in Malibu. According to reports, he was driving at high speed, far above the posted limit on Pacific Coast Highway, and was suspected of being under the influence. When deputies confronted him, Gibson allegedly became belligerent. Once in the patrol car, things rapidly deteriorated. According to TMZ's account of the unedited arresting officer's report, Gibson slammed himself against the seat, shouted profanities, threatened the deputy, and declared that he owned Malibu. But the most shocking part was his volley of anti-Semitic remarks. He reportedly said that the Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. The aftermath was immediate and intense. TMZ published a version of the police report, triggering outrage from Jewish groups and major media coverage. Some accused the LA Sheriff's Department of attempting to sanitize Gibson's behavior. According to sources, the arresting officer was told to omit Gibson's incendiary comments in a revised report. Facing mounting pressure, Gibson issued a public apology. He admitted that he acted like a person completely out of control and called his words despicable. He formally expressed regret to the Jewish community, stating, "Hatred of any kind goes against his faith." In a more profound step, he called for a meeting with Jewish leaders to find a path for healing. Gibson also acknowledged his ongoing battle with alcoholism, describing the arrest as part of a larger relapse. Legally, the consequences were significant but limited. Gibson was sentenced to 3 years probation, ordered to attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and fined. Still, the reputational damage was severe. Hollywood was forced to reckon with his outburst, and the incident became a defining moment in his public life, one that would echo through his later controversies. In the years following his DUI scandal, Mel Gibson's life once again exploded into controversy, this time in the deeply personal arena of a romantic relationship. His relationship with Russian musician Oksana Grigorieva, which began after Gibson's divorce, ended, not just with heartbreak, but with public audio-recorded allegations of abuse. Domestic violence. Allegations. In 2010, Grigorieva released secret recordings of telephone conversations between her and Gibson. On these tapes, Gibson can be heard ranting in profanity, threatening her, and using racially charged insults. He also attacked her for the way she dressed, her appearance, and breast implants. All while their young daughter is in the background, Grigorieva later said she recorded these calls out of fear. She believed he might harm her. The tapes quickly went public via celebrity news outlets, triggering widespread condemnation and fueling a media firestorm. Shortly after the recordings went public, Grigorieva filed a restraining order against Gibson in June 2010. Authorities also launched a domestic violence investigation. In court, Gibson pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor battery charge in early 2011 related to an incident in January 2010. As part of his sentence, he was ordered to undergo counseling, perform community service, and serve probation. That same year, Gibson and Grigorieva reached a civil settlement. he agreed to pay her $750,000 in installments, provided in part to set up a trust for their daughter, Lucia. The settlement also granted her custody rights and a house in Sherman Oaks, California, where she and their daughter would live until Lucia turned 18, after which the property would be sold and the proceeds placed in a trust. Importantly, the deal included a confidentiality clause. Neither party was allowed to publicly discuss any and all information related to allegations of domestic abuse. Grigorieva later violated that confidentiality agreement. In a 2013 interview on The Howard Stern Show, she spoke about her experience, which the court interpreted as implying she had suffered abuse by Gibson. As a result, an appeals court ruled she forfeited $500,000 of the settlement. From Gibson's perspective, the leak of those intimate, volatile recordings was a personal betrayal. In a later interview, he described the tapes as terribly humiliating and painful for my family. He claimed they were edited, and that the recorded rage represented a moment in time, said to one person, "That doesn't represent what I truly believe or how I've treated people." The fallout extended beyond their private lives. Gibson's reputation in Hollywood took another hit. He publicly admitted he did not care if I ever acted again. Several of his projects were delayed, and some collaborators reportedly distanced themselves Grigorieva's allegations, and the tapes became a powerful symbol in his ongoing image crisis. For Gibson, this was more than a legal or financial problem. It was a stark exposure of his personal demons, amplified by his own voice for the world to hear. Even outside the high-profile DUI arrest and domestic disputes, Mel Gibson's reputation has repeatedly been shaped by his own words and public behavior. Over the years, several smaller incidents added layers to the public perception of him as volatile and outspoken. Other personal confessions and outburst. In interviews, Gibson sometimes made comments that were considered sexist or insensitive. For instance, he openly criticized aspects of modern Hollywood, occasionally framing women in the industry as overly politically correct or dismissing certain social causes as distractions from art. While he did not always intend offense, such statements fed a narrative of a man who could be abrasive, judgmental, and occasionally offensive. Gibson also had a reputation for losing his temper on set or at public events. These outbursts, though not criminal, reinforced the image of Gibson as someone whose personal passions could tip into volatility. Even public confrontations outside of film sets added to his controversial persona. In interviews, Gibson sometimes referenced past mistakes with a mixture of defensiveness and candor, admitting that his behavior could be difficult while simultaneously challenging the media's portrayal of him. Though individually these confessions and outbursts were smaller in scale than the DUI or domestic abuse scandals, they cumulatively shaped public perception. They painted Gibson as a talented but unpredictable figure, a man whose personal flaws were as visible as his professional accomplishments. For Hollywood and the public alike, these smaller moments made it harder to separate his work from his personal life, setting the stage for the combined effect of scandals and outspoken criticism that would define much of his career in the following years. While Mel Gibson's personal scandals dominated headlines, he also drew attention for his outspoken criticism of Hollywood itself. Hollywood criticism. In interviews over the years, Gibson has expressed frustration with what he sees as the industry's obsession with image, politics, and conformity. He has described Hollywood as an environment where reputation can be instantly destroyed, and where artistic talent is often secondary to public perception. Following the fallout from his 2006 DUI arrest and the anti-Semitic remarks, Gibson suggested that Hollywood had effectively blacklisted him. In interviews, he claimed that producers and studios were hesitant to work with him, not purely because of the incidents themselves, but because of the fear of public backlash. He described it as a culture of no second chances, in which a single mistake could overshadow decades of work. Gibson has also commented on perceived hypocrisy within the industry. He pointed out that other celebrities, including some with documented histories of serious personal misconduct, were able to continue their careers largely unaffected. In contrast, he argued that his own mistakes were magnified in the media and that Hollywood had little tolerance for his outspoken personality. Beyond politics and hypocrisy, Gibson has expressed frustration with what he calls Hollywood's focus on image over substance. He has criticized studios for prioritizing marketing and star personas rather than creative storytelling, and he has lamented that talent alone is no longer enough to succeed. In his view, reputation management and public relations often outweigh genuine artistry. These statements, while not illegal or scandalous like his personal controversies, contributed to Gibson's public image as a cantankerous, difficult figure. His criticisms were seen by some as the musings of a talented but embittered actor-director. By others, they were candid truths about a cutthroat industry. Either way, they reinforced the narrative that Gibson was both a victim of Hollywood's unforgiving culture and an outspoken figure unwilling to conform to its expectations. Ultimately, Gibson's Hollywood criticism and his personal scandals began to feed into each other. His reputation for volatility made studios wary, and his outspoken nature made it difficult to fully repair his public image. While he remained a recognized talent, the combination of personal missteps and public critique of Hollywood created an environment where even a celebrated actor could struggle to reclaim his footing. Fallout and lesson. By the time Mel Gibson entered the 2010s, the consequences of his public scandals had fused into a single, heavy shadow over his life and career. The man who once enjoyed a rare combination of critical respect, box office power, and charismatic public appeal now occupied an uneasy place in Hollywood, neither fully cancelled nor fully welcomed. The fallout wasn't just professional, it seeped into his personal life, reshaping the way the world viewed him and how he navigated fame itself. Gibson's personal life was the first space where the damage became impossible to ignore. The legal battles with Oksana Grigorieva were not just private conflicts exposed to the world, they became a symbol of his unraveling public image. The leaked audio recordings, in which he could be heard yelling threats, made him a global headline for weeks. Even as Gibson later acknowledged the tapes and apologized for his behavior, the public reaction had already solidified. People were no longer shocked by a single mistake, but by a pattern of volatility. Friends and colleagues have said that Gibson became noticeably more guarded and introspective. After the scandals, reporters who interviewed him during that period described a man who appeared wounded by the public scrutiny, yet frustrated by how difficult it was to move forward. In several interviews, Gibson acknowledged that his relationship with the media had drastically shifted. He spoke about feeling that once he became a target, the press tended to focus on his worst moments and rarely on the work he was trying to rebuild. Gibson believed the narrative surrounding him had hardened, making nearly every new project or appearance a reminder of past mistakes rather than a fresh start. For someone who had once navigated Hollywood with confidence and charm, the shift was stark, a reminder of how quickly public perception can reshape a long-established career. Even his long-standing relationship with the public took a hit. For years, Gibson had been a household favorite, known for an easy charm and sense of humor. After the scandals, he could no longer step into an interview, red carpet, or public appearance without the past being referenced or indirectly implied. It wasn't that he disappeared, it was that he couldn't appear anywhere without the previous decade trailing behind him. The professional consequences were equally significant. Hollywood is an industry that thrives on public sentiment, and the backlash surrounding Gibson made many studios nervous. Even though he was an Oscar-winning director and one of the most bankable stars of the 1990s and early 20s, the major studios largely distanced themselves from him for nearly a decade. Projects he once would have landed easily became harder to secure. Directors and producers quietly confirmed in interviews that funding partners were hesitant to attach Gibson's name to big-budget projects. The industry was afraid, not of his talent, but of the media storm that would accompany any collaboration. In a business where public relations is as important as box office numbers, he became a risk few were willing to take, even when Gibson contributed behind the scenes, such as offering uncredited production help or script notes on projects involving friends. Studios intentionally kept his name out of promotional material. It was a silent acknowledgement of how sensitive his presence had become. Awards bodies, too, grew cautious. While Gibson had created some of the most admired films of his era, Braveheart and The Passion of the Christ being the most notable, anything he touched after 2006 was viewed through a politicized lens. Voters, sponsors, and publicists quietly debated whether honoring his work would send the wrong message. Regardless of artistic merit, what makes Gibson's fallout particularly notable is how it coincided with a broader cultural shift. Between 2006 and the mid-2010s, Hollywood became more publicly conscious about issues like racism, sexism, and abuse. Movements like Me Too and Time's Up later sharpened the industry's focus on accountability. While Gibson's major scandals occurred prior to these movements, they were frequently referenced as examples of unacceptable behavior. This made his comeback even more complicated. For some, supporting Gibson felt like condoning his actions. For others, it became a debate about redemption and whether personal reform should allow someone to reclaim their place in the public sphere. Mel Gibson's journey, from beloved actor to controversial figure, illustrates several striking lessons about fame, accountability, and the evolving landscape of public scrutiny. First, personal behavior can overshadow decades of professional success. Gibson's talent never went away. Critics still acknowledge his skill as a director and actor, but Hollywood's memory of brilliance was no match for the immediacy of scandal. Second, public perception is cumulative. No single event, not even the 2006 DUI, would have derailed his career on its own. It was the succession of incidents, each building upon the previous one, that made the narrative so difficult to escape. Third, private actions often become public currency. The leaked audio tapes with Grigorieva weren't meant for public ears, yet once exposed, they reshaped his legacy permanently. In the digital era, nothing stays private for long, and personal conflict becomes a public spectacle. Fourth, redemption requires consistency, humility, and time. Gibson issued apologies, entered treatment programs, and expressed regret in multiple interviews. But rebuilding trust with both the public and Hollywood has proven to be a slow, uneven process. Ultimately, the fallout from Mel Gibson's confessions and controversies shows how intertwined personal conduct and professional identity have become. It's a story about consequences, but also about the complicated path of forgiveness in an industry that both creates and destroys its own legends. After years of public controversy and career setbacks, Mel Gibson eventually began navigating a long, complicated path toward rebuilding both his image and professional standing. Attempt to redemption. His attempts at redemption didn't come through dramatic public campaigns or flashy apologies, but rather through quieter, consistent efforts to demonstrate personal growth, take responsibility for past behavior, and return to the work he was known for. Gibson's first significant step came through rehabilitation and counseling. Following the 2006 DUI arrest, he entered treatment for alcohol addiction, something he openly acknowledged as a long-running struggle. He spoke in interviews about childhood trauma, anxiety, and dependence, describing alcohol as a destructive coping mechanism that had fueled some of his worst behavior. While he didn't seek sympathy, these admissions helped shift the conversation from scandal to personal accountability. It was the first sign that he wasn't ignoring his past, but trying to understand it. Professionally, Gibson's initial return to Hollywood was slow and deliberately modest. He took smaller roles that didn't place him at the center of massive marketing campaigns. Movies like The Beaver 2011 showed he was willing to work under the radar, focusing on craft rather than attention. Though the film didn't erase public skepticism, it reminded viewers that Gibson remained a capable performer when separated from controversy. The turning point came in 2016 with Hacksaw Ridge, a World War II drama Gibson directed. The film received widespread critical acclaim and earned 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director, a category Gibson hadn't been recognized in since Braveheart. The industry's response didn't signify universal forgiveness, but it demonstrated something important. Talent, consistency, and a strong body of work could slowly re-enter the conversation, even when the public memory of the scandal remained strong. Off-screen, Gibson also made personal efforts to repair strained relationships. He spoke more openly about fatherhood, sobriety, and the importance of growth. Friends and colleagues often described him as calmer and more introspective than in earlier decades. He supported younger filmmakers, appeared in smaller independent projects, and took on roles that didn't rely on former stardom. These choices helped reshape him, not as a Hollywood powerhouse, but as an artist trying to rebuild from the ground up. However, it would be inaccurate to say that Gibson's redemption has been universally embraced. Many critics, fans, and organizations continue to view him with skepticism, and his past remarks remain a permanent part of public discourse, but the consistent effort in his personal life, professional discipline, and willingness to step back rather than demand immediate acceptance has earned him measured respect from some corners of Hollywood. His path forward has been less about wiping the slate clean and more about proving, over time, that he can be better than his worst mistakes. Whether the public fully accepts that journey is complicated, but Gibson's slow, steady re-entry into the industry reflects a man trying, in small but persistent ways, to rebuild what was lost. Even so, the debate around Gibson remains layered and often divisive. Some viewers argue that genuine accountability requires lifelong scrutiny, while others believe that an individual's work and personal growth should be judged within the context of time and effort. Hollywood itself appears split. Certain studios remain hesitant, but independent producers and creative collaborators have shown a willingness to engage with him. What's clear is that Gibson's trajectory no longer follows the predictable arc of a mainstream star. Instead, it reflects a complicated second act shaped by restraint, selective opportunities, and the understanding that redemption, if it comes, must be earned slowly. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and click on the next video shown on your screen.